All right. I'm going to go ahead and start us.
Whew. What's starting. All right, here we go.
Daniel, we'll go ahead and get started maybe in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Sound good?
All right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Let some folks trickle in.
All right, sure thing. All right, so I'm gonna mute my mic for a moment.
Sure. Daniel, you're muted.
Yeah, I noticed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was practicing.
Oh, good. Okay. We wanted to double check. Okay.
Yeah, all good. All good.
Good. Daniel, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Transforming the Workplace Through Neurodiversity. My name is Daniel Stillman, and I am a second year here at the Colorado School of Mines, earning a degree in physics. I want to thank you for joining tonight. We believe acknowledging neurodiversity and expanding that ways we think about neurodiversity in the workplace is critical. We hope we can all learn and grow from this fantastic group of industry leaders here tonight. I would like to introduce our moderators for this evening, Katie Armstrong, the Career and Professional Development Advisor in the Mines Career Center, and Marla Draper, the Director of Disability Support Services.
Thanks, Daniel. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. And I want to, before we kind of get to introducing our panelists this evening, want to just say that this is the first time we're doing a panel like this and acknowledge that this program has been an effort by many, including Jeff Siders over with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. So thank you so much, Jeff, for your help. So before I introduce our panelists this evening, I'd just like to briefly mention how this panel will work. So each of our organizations here tonight will have representatives who will introduce themselves, their organizations, talk about their neurodiversity efforts, and then we'll open up for conversation and Q&A. So on the screen, you'll see a Q&A button where you can submit questions throughout the conversation, and we'll be monitoring that chat throughout. So please, as employers are talking, feel free to put questions in and we will get to them kind of as we go. And so with that, I think we're just going to move right into introducing our panelists and kind of getting this conversation started. So I'd first like to start by warmly welcoming the first company we have here tonight, IBM. We have Diane Delaney, the Neurodiversity at IBM Global Program Manager, and Jen Sanders, a developer there.
Great, thanks, Katie. And thank you for inviting us to be part of the panel today to talk about such an important topic, neurodiversity. So I am Diane Delaney, and I am the Neurodiversity at IBM Global Program Manager. And I took on this role last March, and that was when our program was officially launched. But our work in this area actually began just over 5 years ago. And it was started by two IBMers just with personal interest in autism, excuse me. And they had attended the United Nations Autism Awareness event, which is actually being held tomorrow. So hopefully everybody on this call is aware of that and can attend it. They saw what other companies were doing, and they decided that they needed to get it started at IBM. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important to IBM and have always been a core part of our history for 110 years. But this was really the introduction of neurodiversity at IBM. Our program sits within IBM Human Resources Talent Organization, and it's part of what we call New Collar. And we have 4 initiatives under New Collar, and they include apprenticeships, pathways to technology schools, which I believe there is one in Colorado, up near Boulder or Longmont area. And then also the tech reentry program for people who've been out of the workforce and returning to the workforce. So New Collar focuses on the skills of a person and not necessarily if they have a degree or what their degree is in. And also not excluding people for a variety of unrelated reasons. And this often happens to neurodivergent applicants. And I think April is a perfect month for this event. You know, as I mentioned, the United Nations Autism Awareness Day event is tomorrow, and they celebrated the day last Friday, April 2nd. And IBM is celebrating Neurodiversity Acceptance Month. And this is where we include all neurological differences, not just autism, and recognize them and celebrate them throughout the month. We're building upon 3 key components of our program, and that's enablement in neurodiversity for all of our employees, enhancing our process and procedure so that they're more inclusive of everyone, and then also hiring neurodivergent talent. And we believe that this focus is going to help us move from awareness to acceptance and then to advancement. As an ND ally, I'm honored to have the opportunity to lead this program for IBM. And I'm proud to be joined today by Jen Sanders, who I work very closely with. And I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thanks, Diane. I am Jen Sanders. I'm a Salesforce developer at IBM, and I am proudly neurodivergent, as well as the captain of the presentation squad for neurodiversity at IBM. And before coming to IBM, I ran a consultancy for 9 years, and I was very happy to join with IBM a couple years ago because I finally felt like I had found my home and felt like I had found a place where I could bring my genuine, authentic self to work, and finally felt comfortable enough to come out, as it were, to my managers and team. And happy to be joining you today.
Thank you so much, Diane and Jen. So the next organization that we have with us tonight is JP Morgan Chase & Co. And I'm thrilled to welcome Anthony Picilio, Vice President, Global Head of Autism at Work.
Thank you, Katie. And it's so cool to do these panel events and conferences because, you know, we get to meet up with the IBMs and the Trimbles of the world and talk about our passions, right? So in JP Morgan Chase's case, and I'm not going to make it boring, I'm going to make it cool, I promise to everybody, that we started about 5 years ago. and it was a thought of a senior leader. So we already had that buy-in. And we did that in our mortgage banking area. So we started with 4 folks in QA, and today we're at about 230 folks on the spectrum in 9 countries, soon to be hopefully 12 or 13, and 40 different job roles. So what that speaks to is the breadth of being neurodiverse. It's not just one job that folks on the spectrum can do. We've found pockets where they've been successful in both, IT world, software engineering, of course, everybody knows about that, and but operations areas as well, compliance. We have bank tellers, which are now called associate bankers. But I think to get to where we are today, there's a lot of things that we had to do on the front end, and we didn't know what we didn't know 5 or 6 years ago. So we needed people to help us kind of go through that. And so we had to get a vendor to come in and train our colleagues and recruiters and our managers. We had to figure out how to interview differently. And it's not differently in a bad way, it's differently in a universal way. So the things that we learned apply to both neurodiverse individuals and neurotypical. And it's made kind of the process within JP Morgan Chase a little bit more symbiotic. And I think everybody's kind of understanding that some of the things that we're bringing in from a neurodiverse perspective are helping the neurotypicals. And there's also the culture shift. So if you start out small, which we always encourage, and then grow large, the cultural shift that you'll see is astounding, right? So you're bringing in, X number of people, they're sitting next to colleagues, interacting, and all of a sudden it becomes, people just understand that there is a difference, but a wonderful difference. The empathy starts to exude from everybody, to the left, to the right, to the back, to the front, and you'll just see that monumental cultural shift. I mean, we've had so many people get their driver's license, be independent, got their own apartment, buying their own cars. So there's a lot. You can talk about metrics all you want when you talk about neurodiversity, and everybody wants to know, oh, productivity, it's great. There's the intangibles that make what we do on a daily basis, and IBM and Trimble will be able to tell you that too, is that we see the human side of things. We see that people are people are people. And I think, I could tell you stories upon stories. I love telling stories. But, we are actually moving to a point in our program where we are going to hopefully announce something soon where we're going to be increasing the size of our program, which, is obviously tremendous, but it's not a lot. It's not without help. It's not without IBM talking to us and us talking to IBM. It's not the Microsoft and the SAPs and the UIs of the world doing their thing. We wouldn't be here without everybody kumbayaing and making sure that it's the right thing to do. It's the way that it should be done. And remember, everybody will say this, right? And you've heard it 1,000 times, it's not charity, it's business. We've made the business case for it, but we're also stating that bringing people in who are neurodiverse is just one small pocket. I think we have the ability to touch, the other 600 neurodiverse conditions as well. Autism just happens to be one of those sweet pockets of getting some unbelievable talent and untapped talent. So we're very lucky that we're able to have this program. I can't thank you enough for hosting events like this. This is how the word gets out. And I can't wait to see what we talk about the rest of the 45 minutes.
Thanks, Anthony. All right, so our third organization here tonight is Seagate. I'd like to introduce Chris Waldemar, Vice President of Engineering Product Development Group, and Dan Sokolov, Senior Staff Engineer, Cloud Systems and Solutions.
Hey, Katie, hey, maybe if you can stop sharing, then I'll go ahead and share a few slides. And I just want to say thanks for having us here. Let me go ahead and start to share. We have to show just a couple of slides about Seagate and about our program. Okay. So as Katie said, I'm Chris Waldemar. I'm the Vice President of Engineering at Seagate for the disk drive, hard drive development. I'm also the executive sponsor of our Minds of All Kinds and employee resource group. And I'm also here with Dan Sokoloff, who's our senior staff engineer in the cloud systems and solutions area, used to be in the hard drive area as well. So he's been around as well for a while, as I have. And he's a Minds of All Kinds member. Seagate makes storage devices, whether hard drives, solid state drives, or systems. We are also highly dedicated to a diverse and inclusive and safe workplace. We've been hosting a Minds of All Kinds employee resource group for several years now. And it's been great as the executive sponsor to see that group grow and grow in acceptance. As I think it's been a learning experience for us as a company. This last year, we started a Neurodiversity 101 training course for the whole company, especially for hiring managers. And we're deeply committed to that. I've been doing technology work for over 33 years. And one of the things I love is building diverse teams and turning them loose and seeing how they do and what sort of creativity they bring together. Maybe I'll click through, and just a couple things on Seagate. We make a whole bunch of devices now for storage. We started out as just a hard drive company back in California, and now we make devices for storage in computers, gaming, network attached storage, surveillance devices, and both enterprise, both hard drives and solid state drives for the cloud storage. And I'll try and make this somewhat interesting. We'll see how well this shows up, but this is a disk drive, the inside of it, and you're seeing probably for the first time, this is a 10 disk hard drive that we'll be coming out with later this year. So you saw it here first. Then I'll go ahead and keep rolling through this. And we also make external devices. So these are the little portable drives that we back up our computers on, or wish we had when our computer crashes and we don't have a backup. So hopefully you do, either backed up to the cloud, which we have storage there as well, or backed up onto your desk. So we do that in a whole variety of ways, including for creative experts in our LaCie brand that has ruggedized hard drives with nice bumpers all around them. And then also the most latest product line that we're working on is what's called Live Drive. And these are mobile systems to transfer large amounts of data that enables people to move their data, whether it's from the cloud to somewhere on site, or from somewhere on site up into the cloud. And so that's pretty exciting for us, as people really want data to be mobile. And then lastly, I just want to say a few things about Seagate, and then I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about Minds of All Kinds. Seagate's a global company. We've been very diverse globally, culturally, for decades, going back into the 1980s, with presence all around the world, and design centers in Singapore and factories in Thailand and China, as well as 4 design centers in the United States and sales offices all over the place. We've been around over 40 years, and we have about 40,000 plus employees of all kinds of individuals. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that we, as a company, I'm so happy to be here and be part of this group, not only to share what we're doing, but also to learn what other companies are doing and to hear your questions, to make ourselves better, to make ourselves more inclusive and more adopting of a wide, diverse employee base. So with that, I'll go ahead and shift over to Dan, and Dan, I'll click over for the first slide.
Yep, so we have an employee resource group, which is Minds of All Kinds is what we've named it. Neurodiversity, of course, applies to many different types of differences between people, and Seagate is committed to inclusivity and acceptance of these things. So we put together a charter here. Our goal is to help people be more aware and tolerant of different thinking styles. We are trying to create a safe and judgment-free understanding environment where people can be themselves. And doing this will help people both current employees and future employees be more welcome in the workplace and comfortable. Next slide. We have several focus areas for our resource group. We want to create awareness, not only for individuals, but around the company, and create the safe environment to engage and connect with other people who maybe have similar challenges or advantages. And we do have some brand outreach and community engagement, and we're trying to improve our acquisition and talent attraction to include very good things for the company by finding these talents in people that maybe aren't as usual interviewers. So we're doing some work with the hiring and all the management in the company that way. Next slide. So we've founded this group in November of 2019. We have 39 members in Longmont. There are chapters forming at other sites, and we've created a space for sharing ideas. Some people have neurodiversity insight that others can gain advantage from. Other things that we've talked about are challenges or successes that people have had based on their experience. And it's a great place for not having to worry about who's listening or what's going on with the company. It's just for the people who are in the group, and that's wonderful. We did the training like Chris mentioned, and that's continuing to be available to managers, and especially new managers as they come on. We want to promote our diverse and inclusive environment for people who are looking to join. In the community, we've been partnered with the Temple Grandin School, which is a local autism-based organization, and they have some resources for people and provide some knowledge. That's about it from my perspective. Anything else, Chris?
Thanks, Dan. No, that was great. And thanks, everybody. And we'll look forward to all the questions that come in.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and stop sharing, Katie. So Trimble can take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Dan and Chris. And our last organization here tonight is Trimble. So I'd like to welcome Barry Jansen, software test engineer, Casey Grothis, SketchUp Community Programs trainer, Sam Sartor, a software engineer, and Kipling Brady, talent acquisition business partner. Talk about Trimble's efforts.
Hey, Barry, you're on mute.
Still muted, I think.
It wouldn't be a Zoom webinar if we didn't have a few technical difficulties. So
there we go.
yeah.
All right. Now I think we're ready. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason when I went full screen, it didn't allow me to unmute through the keyboard. So thanks for having us. If you don't know about Trimble, Trimble is a company started in Sunnyvale, California. But our biggest engineering office is actually in Westminster, Colorado, just northeast of the Mines campus. I've got a couple of presenters with me here today. I'm Barry Jansen, and I'll MC this. I have 2 kids that went through Mines, and I also had a cousin, Janice Jansen, who wrote some of the early books on autism and education in the 1990s, before people really knew what autism was. Our next speaker after myself, Kipling Brady, is a talent acquisition business partner for Trimble. So he's the person, if you are looking for a job, he's the person you really want to talk to about Trimble. Let's see, our next presenter, Sam Sartor. Sam, what did you say you graduated in 2018 from Mines?
Yep.
Sam is a software engineer that works on SketchUp for Trimble, does a great job for us. And he can talk a little bit about what it's like to work at Trimble as an engineer. And last but not least is Casey Grothus. Casey's dad worked at Seagate. His mom and dad also worked at IBM. We've been sharing this before the presentation a little bit. But Casey started coming into the office before any of us other 3 presenters even were working at Trimble. He started coming in middle school and doing 3D models. He actually had a bunch of models that Cornell University paid him and his cohorts to develop for a game they were developing, to work a game for kids on the autism spectrum. We later, after Casey got through school, hired him full-time, and he runs our neurodiversity programs at Trimble and does a great job at that. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about how we got started. We started as a Boulder startup called Atlas Software. And early on, we learned that SketchUp is a 3D drawing program, and we learned from our customer base of architects that it really appealed to their kids who happen to be on the spectrum. Turns out a lot of architects are on the spectrum probably, as well as are a number of engineers and all kinds of people, as we've discovered over the years. Well, what this gave their kids the ability to do is to speak visually. There's lots of ways of communicating. Sometimes if you struggle with giving a presentation, it doesn't mean you're not an incredible coder, you're not an incredible modeler. You can't express yourself by drawing or pictures or many other ways. And so that really sort of drove our attention. We started working with Autism Society of Boulder County and the Autism Society of America. We've been working with Temple Grandin School since before they were Temple Grandin School, and one of our vice presidents is on their board. So we do a lot of work in the community with all of this stuff. And I'll turn this over to Kipling, who can talk a little bit more about the general overview of Trimble.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, so Kipling Brady, I'm a talent acquisition business partner for Trimble. I had mentioned this in the warm-up, but I actually started with Trimble the day after SketchUp was acquired. So I started on April 27th. In 20 days, it will be my anniversary within Trimble of 2012. And on the 26th is when SketchUp was acquired. So Trimble as a company was founded in 1978. We were founded in Los Altos in the top of a chocolate factory by Charlie Trimble and 2 other engineers from HP. In case you didn't catch that is correct. We were founded in the top of a chocolate factory. Charlie saw a great future for this navigation product that was originally called Loran. And HP, they thought that it was a nice product, but they didn't share the same enthusiasm for what this product was. They thought of it as a novelty, and Charlie thought of it as kind of the next utility, this idea of navigation, right? And Charlie really understood the value of navigation. He was actually legally blind, which makes sense when you think about it, right? The person that helped kind of innovate and bring about the industry that we know of now as GPS and navigation is somebody that already struggled with navigation inside themselves. So Trimble today has over 11,000 employees that span across 40 different business areas. Barry mentioned the SketchUp architecture division that we have, which is part of our kind of construction industry. So we have sectors within Trimble. So construction, heavily involved in agriculture, geospatial, transportation, often on-road autonomy, and cloud and data services that connect our customers. So the industries, what we look to do is to change the way that the world works by connecting the physical world to the digital world. So if you've ever seen a geologist or a surveyor in a field, you'll see them use what looks like a tripod. Those are called total stations. Those were designed by Trimble. On the top of a tractor, you would see what looks like a really small thin box. It's a GNSS receiver. That's designed by Trimble, but there's also an autopilot platform that is built for steering that equipment, basically holding the line, turning, pivoting the vehicle, and bring it down the next line. That is Trimble technology. We were the first to bring automation, vehicular automation, to agriculture back in 2004. So there's within our company, we span over 40 countries, and we've got over 430 opportunities open across the globe, 250 of which are right here in the US. That's it for me.
All right, Sam.
Can you all hear me pretty well? Cool. So Barry was just telling you, told you a little bit about SketchUp. Think of it like SolidWorks, but 100 times easier and faster and looser. It's a really fun application to work on. The team I work on in particular is responsible for porting that application to run in a web browser. So it's as easy as possible for new users from any background to come and get started with 3D modeling. I personally think we've been quite successful in doing that since around 1 million students, hobbyists, and professionals from around the world use SketchUp for Web every month. Many more if you count K-12 students. However, as maybe you can imagine, a website that lets you draw in 3D is not built the same way as any sort of traditional website like Wikipedia. We really have the heart of a C++ application running alongside very modern JavaScript. You see code straight out of Dr. Paon's computer graphics class running next to something you'd see in like software engineering's Clue game, or even next code you'd never see at Minds at all. I'd love to explain that to you all in detail, and maybe I've already gone a little too into detail, but the end effect is that everyone on our team needs a whole weird mash of different computer science skills. We're trying to hire new people right now, and it's hard. And beyond that, my team benefits massively from having people with a range of strengths and weaknesses and past experiences from every corner of computer science and even outside computer science, and just really whole different personalities. Personally, as maybe you can tell by my desk full of fidgets, I was always the poster child for ADHD, especially at Minds, where I made plenty of use of accommodations such as the testing center. So I sort of bring a really spastic on and off energy to development of our application. I'll spend a few days on one side of the code base and then get distracted by something wholly unrelated, maybe even to work. And that spastic ideation is balanced out nicely by my teammates who help me drag the better ideas out of my brain and into the world to our customers. And that sort of collaborative spirit, gleeful daily teamwork, and general diversity of perspective is really the only reason my team can do anything like what it does. And none of us would have it any other way.
Very cool. Thanks, Sam. All right. Whoop. Next, we'll go to Casey Grothus. He'll talk on a couple of topics. Go ahead, Casey.
Sure. Hi, I'm Casey. I was originally an intern at SketchUp, but before that I played around a lot with SketchUp as I was growing up through middle school and high school and even college. And now I kind of get to help run Project Spectrum, which is our autism program, along with Barry. And I think we do a pretty decent job, all things considered. Excuse me. Trimble has been doing several different things to support neurodiversity, but most recently, we got to go ahead to start an official employee resource network. Officially, we kind of been meeting on and off casually over lunch for a while now, but now we're going to make it an official resource network. And we're still putting the finishing touches on the network itself, but we have big plans for its future, and I think it can really make a big difference. For a lot of people, hopefully. Yeah. And do you have another slide, Barry? There. Yes. We've had a fair amount of success with some of our interns, some more than others, but that's to be expected. After all, if you meet an individual on the autism spectrum, you've met that one individual, and they're not necessarily representative of the entire group. It's a spectrum after all. But we've had success with several of the interns. One of them was hired on full time and gets to work on our experimental technologies team. I can't say what they're working on because, well, for various reasons, but they get to work on some pretty neat stuff. And as far as lessons learned as part of the program, we fairly quickly figured out that our interns, while extremely capable, sometimes require a bit of help getting up to speed at a high-tech job. For some, it's their first high-tech job, and for others, it's their first job ever. Once they get up to speed, though, we find that they're very skilled at what they do, and they're often willing to go the extra mile to make sure a project is as close to perfect as possible. Ultimately, that always makes up for them having a slightly slower start, but it does take some time for them to get there. With that said, we try to put together some materials for them and help them and designate a person that they can ask what might be considered by some to be a stupid question. But it's really a question they need an answer to, so it's not stupid at all. And sort of designate a mentor for them to ask these things to help get them up to speed a little faster, but ultimately to make them comfortable and know it's okay to mess up occasionally. On my first day at Trimble, I had to fill out some paperwork, and I went over to print some out, and I ended up using our large form printer. And instead of printing out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, it printed out on a large roll of paper that's typically reserved for blueprints and schematics. So I very quickly learned to ask questions and get answers if I'm unsure, and never to be afraid to make a mistake. If you need to do something, you just got to try it. Anyways, that's all I got for now.
Very good. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you all so much. I think this is just, I'm like energized hearing about all these amazing things that companies are doing. So Marla is going to take over and kind of moderating the conversation. There are some great and hefty questions in the chat. So do feel free to type responses as well as you know, so we don't run out of time too. But I just want to mention, like, there's some really great questions in there that could take Marla the whole time to just read them. So we're going to kind of keep going with that. And if we miss anything, we'll follow up after the panel with additional questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, so this first question, it looks like Chris from Seagate, maybe you wanted to answer, but I'll go ahead and say it out loud, and then if you want to take over, that's great. Could you describe an example of how systematic adjustments made to accommodate a small number of diverse individuals ended up unexpectedly benefiting everyone?
Well, when I was reading that question, it struck me over the example of like sort of what we've been through this past year with the pandemic, and prior to that, we had very little experience. I had very little experience with sort of a flexible work structure of some people working at home, some people coming on site. We had a few people that were sort of pioneers in doing that, and in a way, they helped to enable us to essentially survive this past year, and then move to this kind of hybrid work environment where we had an essential group of people coming into the workforce every day, but then others were logging in from home and even attaching into the lab and working on devices in the lab from home, and it was enabled by that. And then one of the things I wanted to add on is, similar to how I've been thinking about this over the last 9 months or so, that we talk about how everyone learns sort of in different ways, and maybe it's just like everyone knows this but me until recently, but we all work in different ways too, and that as we've I feel like we've all been sort of this training over the last year plus of how to be able to work in lots of different ways and be effective in lots of different ways. So that, and I think we've learned as a company, Seagate has, that we can do that in a much more customized way to help accommodate, people that maybe having a day at home to crunch a bunch of data and do a bunch of analysis would be way more optimized, way better for them. Other person may say, no, I really don't want to be at home. I can do that much better at work. And I think we've been shown the example that we can free up our way of thinking about work in a much better way over this past year.
Thank you, Chris. Does anybody else want to answer or address that question with other information?
I can throw my 2 cents in if you don't mind, Marla. And I think I talked about it a little bit earlier about interviewing, but I think it's not just about interviewing, right? It's about how we get people in the door, right? And instead of having people look at job requisitions that are 4 pages long that have basket weaving 101 in them when you don't need that to be in there to do the job. If you need Java, you need Java down. And I love when I see everybody laughing about that, but it's so true. Like, we've gone and refined as much as we can a lot of those job requisitions because we want people opting into the job and applying for the job versus opting out and looking through and going, because I don't have that, I'm not going to apply to that. Half the time, all you guys know who your hiring managers, you don't need half the junk that's on there. And the things about, need to talk to senior leaders and executive level summaries and all this other gobbledygook that's on there. You don't need that as well. Typically, there's somebody who's going to be a liaison between the senior executive and yourself. You can be an individual contributor and still do a bang up job. And what we found is that it applies to everybody, right? So even folks who are opting out, who are neurotypical, are like, okay, well, I only need this 5 subsets of things to do. I can do that job too. So that's our kind of take on it as well. But I agree with Chris as well.
Thank you, Anthony. And I see that Barry provided a written response to that question too. Barry said at Google, we had quiet rooms. So if you felt stressed or pressured and needed a break, you could go there for a place to be calm. And at Trimble, we are next to nature, so outdoor walks during the day are acceptable and encouraged. And then there's another question that came in, it looks like has been answered by Jen. So I'm gonna ask this one that hasn't been answered yet, so we get to it. As of, it moved to a different screen. Hold on. As a follow-up, does anyone know of any scholarly research concerning the link between ADHD and software engineering? There is a wealth of anecdotal evidence that some characteristics of ADHD lend well to software, but I have been able to find any quantifiable research on the topic. And I see that Barry answered that one as well, but if anybody else wants to add some additional information. That's a very specific question.
mean, personally, me with ADHD, I've always really loved software engineering, but I like the aspect that you get to that, in a sense, like going off the beaten path isn't such a bad thing, that you can kind of get distracted, and that really that manifests as just different sorts of ideas in the mix. Because the way you design, the way you build software, there isn't so much of a structure. I don't do super great with structure, and the fact that it's just kind of like, oh, if you can provide value, with whatever you're doing today, whether it was what was planned or not, I really appreciate.
And I would second Sam's. Notice on the wall behind him, there's some musical instruments. When I got hired by IBM, and computer science schools were kind of in their infancy, and I was an electrical engineer, they looked for musicians, because musicians, even though I have ADD as well, ADHD as well, the musical background gave you a sense of a big score, an 8-bar section, different pieces of music. And so they appreciated that even if there wasn't a computer science school that was teaching you all that, you could take a big work into your mind at the same time, realizing that different sections of the music would play off each other.
I actually can't read music to save my life, but that violin there does just sit on my desk all day, and it's constantly in my hands, and I'll strum out a fiddle tune or something. And
Yeah.
That's
Good
the nice
distraction.
thing about being working from home, is my coworkers, probably wouldn't have let me bring my violin into the office.
Yeah.
So this next question is, oh, did you want to say something, Katie?
Oh, I was Diane. I was just going to share that one of our teams in cybersecurity, one of the managers of our cybersecurity pen test team, has the most music majors on his team. So not cybersecurity majors, but music majors. And the way, like you were describing, the way their brain works, it lends itself great in cybersecurity. So just throw out the music aspect there as well.
All right, there's another really great question, and I can appreciate this because I hear this narrative from a lot of students that I work with. But the next question is, as a software developer with ADHD, I see how my ADHD can at times be a benefit to my career. If I'm interested in a problem, I can sit and zone in for hours until it's solved. However, if I find it difficult to focus on problems I'm less interested in, such as writing tests or fixing bugs. Does anyone have any strategies they have implemented or recommended to overcome this? Jen did provide one in the chat here that said, I dedicate small blocks of time that I block off on my calendar to do the items I struggle with attention-wise. Having a larger team also has been a tremendous help, as well as all of us have our strengths. Anyone else want to join in and provide some additional insight on that?
For me personally,
Go ahead. Sorry.
For me personally, the biggest thing was definitely the team, like absolutely. And to an extent, my ADHD is never going to be shut down. But just being in a little circle of desks with everyone working, at least for me, does wonders for like, oh, well, everyone else is working on their bugs, so I'll work on mine too. It's harder to be distracted when you're in that sort of atmosphere. But in general, like I said, if you can provide value, you can provide value, and I feel like, at least on our team, we're very flexible with, if you're burned down on a bug, if you put the last 2 days into a bug and you're just like, if I put another day into this, I'm not going to be productive. I'm going to be distracted. I'm going to be staring at, blog posts and YouTube videos, hopefully not, but, just generally not putting my all into it. It's very flexible with, okay, Sam, put it down, pick up something else you're more interested in, do that for a bit.
Casey, go ahead. I'll go
Yeah,
after you.
I was going to say, don't be afraid of asking for some chemical help if you need it in terms of medication. I have a very moderate case of ADHD, but I find if there are some meds I take in the morning that help me to wake up, help me to focus, help me to start my day off on the right foot, and then I just kind of hit the ground running, so to speak, and I'm able to just sort of zone in and solve problems, not coding problems necessarily in my case, but I find it I suppose what I'm trying to say is don't be afraid to look into going to see a doctor and getting some pharmacological help if you need it.
Temple Grandin would agree with that. You know, she doesn't talk about it a whole lot publicly, but she wholly believes that helped change her life as well. I had 3 engineering kids. The 2 that had ADHD, I strongly encouraged to go to Mines because everybody around you is an engineer. And when everybody around you is working on the same kind of stuff versus CU, where the campus kind of clears out to go skiing on the weekends and things change. Not everybody is a serious engineer. It's a little harder to get through, and I'm not sure my ADHD kids would have gotten through CU like they did at Mines.
So Marla, I think I would offer a perspective and put in just a real quick plug for what we do at the state of Colorado as we develop and then ultimately deploy talent. And it's quite a few of whom, are neurodiverse individuals that making sure that the right support resources are in place. And I've heard Temple Grandin, speak both on the record and off the record about, having the supports in place. And then what we can offer, and we're not the only program by any stretch, but what we can be is a gatekeeper to connect somebody who might be struggling at work with whatever appropriate resource might be, whether it's a life coach, somebody to check in with, whether it's, some coaching sheets that I put together with a gentleman who's a manager at Google, who's on the autism spectrum himself. And so we've been deploying that when I have helped somebody get a job, especially at an enterprise level, doing software development. So there's a variety of different resources, and sometimes we just push on through, and we might teach 2 or 3 just cognitive coping skills to help someone to just get through the less interesting tasks. But there's a variety of assistive technologies as well that could be explored. So I'll stop there, but there are resources out there because it really does take a village to promote long-term success.
I'll go ahead and ask a question to the group and aim to kind of summarize 2 of the questions I see in the chat, but this is something that has come up. I think Jen mentioned it in her introduction about kind of her coming out, as you called it. But one of the questions was about, tips for navigating interviews, but I think a larger question many students ask about is the idea of disclosure and how, as they're going through the interview, everyone's nodding. I love that. How to talk about, how to talk to the employer, how to bring it up, when is the time, and just advice in that process for students that can be tricky to navigate.
I would grab a friend and have a neurotypical friend and have them do a mock interview with them. And if they think that somebody could notice or it could be an issue or something, always we would encourage you to disclose if you're comfortable with it. If you're absolutely not, and we have about a third, I would say, Casey, probably about a third of our folks do not disclose and don't talk about it. And we don't let people know they're in our little group, but because that's how they choose to do that. We've had to take down websites where one of our interns was in a blog post, and he said he went back to college and his new roommate found out that, oh, great, my new roommate's on the autism spectrum. That's gonna suck, And he said, we ended up being great friends, but it got us off on the wrong foot. And so we've taken down websites like that too, and to protect them if they choose. So it's completely their choice. But if you're at all hesitant, I would disclose, because then you can get accommodations. Then we can't not hire you because of the accommodations you asked for. But that's not right for everybody. So that's got to be an individual choice, and we'll always respect that.
Marla, I would just add one thing, which follows along much with what Barry is saying, and that is if an accommodation is needed, then we like to present a roadmap to the employer for what that is going to look like, but then also flip that around so that we're looking at a disability as a competitive advantage. And I have worked with hundreds upon hundreds of candidates from PhD level all the way down to folks who are helping to go to work at Starbucks doing part-time dishwashing. And in every single case, there's a competitive advantage to be found if we think about it. And being able to articulate that, I think, can be important as part of the disclosure.
That's some great information. And I know we're coming up on time. Katie, do we have time for another question, or I don't see any others in the chat here?
Yeah, I love if folks could share, what are some of with that kind of that process of hiring, onboarding, what are some creative things that you're doing to make your organizations more inclusive and welcoming for people who might identify as neurodiverse or neurodivergent?
Katie, it's Anthony. Do you mind if I throw 2 cents in there again? Actually, it would be 3 cents since I already threw 2 in previously. So I think what we've done is we've actually developed an onboarding team that's dedicated to folks who are on the spectrum. We actually have a global securities investigation team, people who do your fingerprinting and all that other good stuff. We have a liaison there. So it's kind of a premier touch service that we provide. So we also, our onboarding team will walk them through the application. We'll give kind of a Google's maps to where they're going to go, pictures of the people they're going to meet from the hiring manager, or who's going to meet them at the door, where the door is, always a good thing, and the environment that they're going to walk through and be working in potentially, to see if there's something, it's too loud or too bright or whatever it may be, even though that piece of it from an accommodation standpoint has been few and far between. The most that we give out on a commonality pace is noise canceling headphones. But, we do have separate folks that just do our neurodiversity hires, which is absolutely the best thing we ever did. Now, your company might be a little bit smaller in scale, a little tougher to do, but there's ways around that.
Thanks, Anthony. Any others?
If we have time, I had one more follow-up question. Trimble mentioned mentors. So I wanted to know if anybody had thoughts on what the mentor process or assigning mentors to neurodiverse folks, what that looks like, if it's something that they're offered and it's voluntary, or if there's any specific structure in place that you have for mentors in the workplace.
We've been doing this long enough that I kind of know who friends of, we call it internally Project Spectrum, but we know who the friends of the program are. And so I have tons of engineers that I know I can go to when somebody's in a particular area or particular department. And so it is fairly informal, because depending on I've had one person who's been an incredible mentor. And right now his workload is just very heavy, and he has a young daughter that is homeschooling as well. And so COVID has kind of thrown a monkey wrench into that too. So it has to be flexible, it has to be, but we'll search those out. And I just have no qualms calling anybody in Trimble any time. You just have to be fearless. You don't know until you ask. And I have people say no, and I go out of my way to respect that, no matter what, even if I know they have time or they have the ability or whatever. If they are not comfortable, it's a completely opt-in program too. So you have to be respectful of that, because they may be opting out just because some particular situation at that time, and you can go back to them a year later and they might accept too. So, but we pair multiple people. Casey works with them if they have particular HR questions, or, the copier, the printers, all kinds of things, or And we also have our HR people in touch with a number of outside consultants that we use, that if somebody needs a coaching session, we can get an individual lined up with an external coach that's more, not so much career-wise mentor, but there's some behavior things or something. I'm mad at my manager or something, you know, then, well, let's get a career coach in there. They can help with those kinds of things. So, yeah.
Also, in a less formal sense, I can't speak to the whole of Trimble in the way that was just spoken to, but if you're a software engineer coming new to a team, especially our team, there's an expectation that no matter like what a good education you got, no matter what was on your resume, our code base is going to be something you've never ever seen before. And if just for business value, if not even for the fact that it's a lot of fun, we'll spend a lot of time together and try and get you sort of accustomed with the team and the way we work and the code, and just hang out and talk a lot if that's what you want, just to kind of get you onboarded. I think especially if you're neurodivergent, an explicit mentor is a fantastic idea. Or not diverse, I'm sorry. But in just the case of like, how do I fit in with this group of people? I feel like we do our best at Trimble and at SketchUp and at SketchUp Web for Web to be just as welcoming as possible and try and just help out as much as we can in person, over video calls. You don't have to schedule a meeting, just talk to anyone on chat at any time, and we'd love to help in any way we can.
And as Trimble is as a whole, in addition to the SketchUp team, we also have an ambassador program where when people start on their first day, they're assigned an ambassador that is not the hiring manager, right? It's not so HR, right? So it's somebody else that they can go to, they can discuss, and it also could be somebody that if they have disclosed on the front end, if the individual has disclosed, that we can pair them up with somebody that may have some familiarity with those and can address those as well, or that after they start, if they disclose at that point. So it's not that somebody should or that they have to, but if they feel comfortable, we can also ensure that some of those ambassadors can also be paired up effectively, so that over that first. People always remember the first 5 minutes, right, of an interaction, right? So when within your employment, you remember the first indoctrination into the company and the people that helped and gave you additional information as you started. So I think that those ambassador programs are really helpful as well. Somebody outside of HR and somebody outside of the direct report that you have.
All right. We are at time, so I want to respect folks' time. I want to just say a sincere thank you to everyone that joined as panelists to talk about your experiences, your companies. This has been wonderful for us. We hope that attendees were able to get some helpful information out of this. And please reach out to the Career Center, Disability Support Services for follow-up, for questions that went unanswered, or to try to connect with anyone that you met today. And we are more than happy to help. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. Again, thank you. Happy Wednesday.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.